Good evening. It's a real pleasure to be here to share with you one of the initiatives that actually came out of the business call to action. In many parts of the world...
Why should business take part of the work on this global issue?
I really come from a different angle. I'm not asking business for charity. I'm asking business to do their business, but under good governance. If you stop corruption, you stop bribing people, you stop mispricing when you deal with underdeveloped countries, actually, we make more money than AIDS. Okay, so do your business, but do it cleanly and properly. Business creates jobs, creates prosperity, and that's what we want. So we're not asking you to do anything other than observe good governance. Good governance is only not required from governments, it's also required from private sector. So private sector need to behave. They need to have good governance.
Welcome, Mr. Baxter. Today, acting CEO of IBLF in London. You have a history back, and you have been working many years in BP, and now in a business network. And how is you reflecting to how to work with this type of development issues regarding poverty and human rights issues? When you look at your own experience in an individual company compared to work in a network?
Well, towards the end of my time with BP, I had the privilege and opportunity to work with Lord Brown, John Brown, who was the then CEO. And what I learned from that interaction was the power of individual leadership within even a huge company of the size of BP, with something around 100,000 employees at that time. Leadership sets the tone and creates the space for these conversations to develop. Now I've moved to the International Business Leaders Forum. As the name implies, we firmly believe in the power of business leadership to set the agenda and to drive these issues forward from a business perspective, from a perspective of doing better business at the same time as doing good. So that mutual advantage, a term which John Brown coined and used frequently, both win-win for business and also for social development. Given the appropriate leadership from the very top of the company, that I think can be a very powerful and necessary driver for achieving the Millennium Development Goals.
So if you look at the situation today in the market, then what could be advice to a CEO who run a company reflecting on these issues?
Well, I think the CEO has to be aware of all of the external opportunities and challenges. That's part of the job. And the challenge for the CEO is to take the long-term sustainable view, because it is when you do that, when you look to the business in 10, 15, 20 years' time, you see that the well-being of the company is explicitly tied up with the long-term benefit and growth of society. So for business to take its rightful place in societal development, social development issues becomes a natural thing. Not without its challenges, but for any CEO, surely something worthy of serious consideration.
And begin to be interested in a transfer of technology, not to emerging markets in middle-income developing countries, but in the very poorest countries, because of the enormous effect it can have, an effect equivalent to the leapfrogging of the mobile phone, the way the mobile phone has enabled poor people, poor farmers, women, street vendors even, they all have mobile phones, and they use them for tracking the markets, prices, they use them to transfer money, for education, for health, surveillance, etc. And this is only the beginning. And I think I'd love to see the private sector really take an initiative on climate justice, the market of the billions. Let me give you a health analogy. I chair the Gavi Alliance Board, and when the Gates Foundation put in money about 10 years ago and linked with the UN as a whole, the UNICEF, the World Health Organization, the World Bank, donor governments, developing countries, the private sector, the churches, in reaching the poorest children. What we did is we created a market for immunizing the poorest children. And the vaccine companies were interested, the pharmaceutical sector became interested. We need to create a market.